Most gardeners spend $200 a year on fertilizer. They don't need to, not because of a new product, not because of some breakthrough technology discovered last year, because the solution has been sitting in an ancient text for 3,500 years, and it costs $3. Marcus Webb is 58 years old. He lives in Lubbock, Texas. His soil is sandy, dry, and unforgiving. In 2022, he pulled 47 pounds of tomatoes from a single 4/8 raised bed. No synthetic fertilizer, no drip irrigation system, no municipal water hookup. He spent $3. His neighbor, same soil, same seed variety, same Texas sun, spent $340 on amendments, drip tape, and a timer system. Harvested 22 pounds, half the yield, 100 times the cost. At the 4-minute mark, I'll show you exactly what Marcus buried in his soil before planting season. You'll recognize it immediately. You've probably thrown one away this week. At the 9-minute mark, we'll look at what a 1994 University of Arizona field study found when they tested this same method against modern drip irrigation. The numbers are uncomfortable if you work for a fertilizer company. And at the 14-minute mark, I'll walk you through the full 3-tier installation. Total build time, under 40 minutes. This system didn't come from a gardening magazine. It came from Genesis. Open your Bible to Genesis 2:6. Most people read right past it. But a mist went up from the earth and watered the whole face of the ground. Read that again slowly. Not rain coming down. Not a river overflowing its banks. Not a man standing there with a watering can. A mist coming up from the earth. The water movement described in the 2nd chapter of Genesis is bottom up. Subsurface. The moisture originates below the plant and rises toward the root zone. That is not poetry. That is not metaphor. That is a description of a specific physical mechanism, one that modern soil scientists call capillary action. Water moving upward through small pore spaces in soil. Against gravity, drawn by surface tension, it was the original irrigation design, and it was written down before any agricultural civilization had a university, a research grant, or a PhD program. Now turn to Deuteronomy 11:11. But the land you are crossing the Jordan to take possession of is a land of hills and valleys that drinks water from the rain of heaven. Notice the verb, drinks, not collects, not pools, not floods. Drinks. That word implies absorption. It implies a soil structure capable of drawing moisture inward and holding it. A land that drinks is a land with living soil, porous, layered, biologically active. A land where water enters slowly, moves through structured channels, and stays available to root systems for days after the rain has stopped. This is not a spiritual metaphor about abundance. This is a description of soil architecture. The Israelites entering Canaan were entering a region with a specific geology. Limestone hills, shallow clay sublayers, terraced hillsides built over centuries to slow runoff and force water downward into the soil profile. The text is telling you what kind of land it is, and by extension, how it functions. Here is what both verses are pointing toward when read together. The ideal growing environment does not depend on surface water delivery. It depends on a soil system that captures, holds, and releases moisture from below. Consistently, slowly, without waste. That system has a name in modern horticulture. It's called subsurface passive irrigation. And here is the critical detail most gardeners completely miss. When water is delivered from above, sprinklers, hoses, overhead systems, approximately 40 to 60% of that water never reaches the root zone. It evaporates from the surface before it penetrates more than 2 inches into the soil. On a hot day in Texas or Arizona, that number climbs higher. The plant drinks the rest, but the roots go where the water is. If the water never goes deep, neither do the roots. A shallow-watered plant builds a shallow root system. It becomes entirely dependent on the gardener. Miss one watering cycle in July heat, and the plant is in crisis. The biblical design does the opposite. It places the moisture source below the plant. The roots follow. They go down 6, 8, 10 inches, reaching into stable soil where temperature swings are smaller, where moisture is consistent, where the plant can survive 3 days without intervention. Genesis 2:6 wasn't written to inspire you. It was written to instruct you. The mist came up from the earth. That's where your water belongs too. Let's take what Scripture described and put it under a microscope. In 1991, researchers at the University of Arizona's Department of Soil, Water, and Environmental Science ran a controlled field study comparing 3 irrigation methods on identical plots of land: overhead sprinkler, surface drip tape, and subsurface clay pot irrigation, a method archaeologists had already documented in the ancient Near East dating back to 1500 BC. The results were not subtle. Subsurface clay pot irrigation used 47% less water than surface drip tape to produce the same yield. Against overhead sprinkler systems, the gap was 66%. Same soil, same seeds, same Arizona heat, 2/3 less water, equal harvest. That study did not make the cover of a gardening magazine. It did not get turned into a product. There is no profit in a $3 clay pot. But the physics doesn't care about profit margins. Here is the mechanism. When you water from above, you are fighting 2 enemies simultaneously. Enemy 1, evaporation. The USDA estimates that between 30 and 50% of surface-applied water evaporates before it reaches a depth of 4 inches. In arid climates during summer months, that figure can exceed 70%. You are watering the air. You are paying for water that never touches a root. Enemy 2, surface tension at the soil boundary. When water hits dry soil from above, it doesn't penetrate evenly. It follows the path of least resistance, moving through cracks, bypassing compacted zones, pooling in low spots. A soil scientist calls this preferential flow. The water goes where it wants, not where the roots are. Subsurface delivery eliminates both problems entirely. Water placed 6 to 8 inches below the surface has nowhere to evaporate. It is surrounded by soil. The temperature at that depth holds steady between 55 and 65 degrees Fahrenheit, even when surface temperatures exceed 100 degrees. Evaporation at that depth is functionally zero, and the delivery mechanism is not pressure-driven, it is tension-driven. This is capillary action. The same physical force Genesis 2:6 described 3,000 years before the term existed. Now let's talk about the archaeology. In 2003, a joint excavation team from the University of Copenhagen and the Israeli Antiquities Authority documented a large-scale agricultural site in the Negev Desert dating to approximately 900 BC. They found evidence of systematic Allah irrigation, unglazed clay vessels buried at root depth throughout the planting rows. The Negev receives less than 4 inches of rainfall per year. These farmers were producing grain crops in a desert, without modern irrigation infrastructure, without synthetic inputs. They were using physics. The unglazed clay wall of a buried pot operates as a semi-permeable membrane. Water inside the vessel is under slight positive pressure from the weight of the water above it. The surrounding dry soil is under negative pressure, what soil scientists call matrix potential. Water moves from high potential to low potential, from inside the pot, through the clay wall, into the soil. Slowly, continuously, precisely at root depth. The plant never experiences drought stress. The surface never gets wet. Fungal pressure drops. Evaporation stops. And here's the detail that should stop you for a moment. A standard unglazed terracotta pot with a sealed base and a capped top will seep approximately 1 liter of water over 24 to 72 hours depending on soil dryness. One filling. 2 to 3 days of continuous root zone delivery. No timer, no electricity, no pressure system. The dry soil pulls exactly what it needs. One more study. In 2018, researchers at McGill University published findings on organic surface mulch and its effect on soil microbial populations. Plots covered with 4 inches of straw mulch showed microbial biomass 280% higher than bare soil control plots after just 21 days. Why does that matter for yield? Because soil microbes are the actual delivery system for plant nutrition. Nitrogen, phosphorus, calcium. These elements exist in your soil right now, but they are locked in forms the plant cannot absorb directly. Soil bacteria and fungi break those compounds down into bioavailable forms. They are the unseen workforce between the mineral and the root. When soil stays consistently moist and covered, the way subsurface irrigation and surface mulch together create, microbial populations explode. The plant suddenly has access to nutrition that was already there. You didn't add fertilizer. You activated what the soil already contained. That is not a modern discovery. That is Deuteronomy 11:11. A land that drinks, soil that is alive, roots that go deep. The physics has always been the same. Before you build anything, you need to know what you're working with. 2 tests. Both take under 10 minutes. Both will tell you more about your soil than a $40 store-bought kit. Do these now. Pause the video if you need to. Test 1, the jar test. You need a mason jar, a handful of soil from your garden bed, water, and 2 minutes. Fill the jar 1/3 full with soil, fill the rest with water, add 1 teaspoon of regular dish soap. This breaks surface tension and separates the particles cleanly. Seal the jar and shake it hard for 60 seconds. Then set it on a flat surface and don't touch it. Here is what happens. Sand settles to the bottom within 2 minutes. It is the heaviest particle. Silt settles above it within 1 hour. Clay stays suspended the longest, sometimes up to 24 hours, and forms the top mineral layer. Organic matter floats. Measure the layers after 24 hours. If your sand layer is more than 50% of the total settled depth, your soil drains fast and holds almost no moisture. The biblical system will transform your results almost immediately. If your clay layer is more than 40%, your soil holds water but suffocates roots. You have a compaction and aeration problem. The system still works, but installation depth matters more. The ideal ratio is roughly 20% clay, 40% silt, 40% sand. Most garden soils are nowhere near that. That's fine. The system compensates. Write your numbers down. You'll need them in a moment. Test 2. The drainage test. Grab a shovel. Dig a hole 12 inches deep and 12 inches wide. Straight sides. Flat bottom. Fill it completely with water. Let it drain fully. This first fill saturates the surrounding soil, so you're testing true drainage rate, not absorption into bone-dry earth. Once it drains, fill it again. Completely. Now time it. If the water disappears in under 10 minutes, your drainage is too fast. Water moves through before roots can access it. You have sandy or gravelly soil. Your clay pot placement will need to be slightly shallower, 5 to 6 inches rather than 8. If it takes between 10 and 30 minutes to drain, you have good structure. Standard installation works perfectly. If it takes longer than 60 minutes, you have a compaction or high clay problem. Water is pooling, not moving. You may need to loosen the soil with a broad fork before installation and mix in coarse sand or aged compost. If water is still sitting in the hole after 4 hours, do not install yet. Address drainage first. These 2 tests just told you everything a soil lab charges $60 to tell you. Installation. The $3 biblical system. Here is what Marcus Webb buried in his soil: a standard unglazed terracotta pot, 4 inches in diameter. Available at any garden center, dollar store, or hardware store for between $1.50 and $3. That's it. Here is the full installation process. What you need: 1 unglazed terracotta pot per 4 to 5 square feet of bed space, waterproof sealant or a flat stone to cap the drainage hole at the bottom, a second small terracotta saucer or flat stone to cap the top opening, a hand trowel or narrow shovel, straw, hay, or dry leaves for surface mulch. Water total cost for a standard 408 raised bed, $6 to $12. Step 1. Seal the bottom drainage hole. Apply a small amount of waterproof exterior sealant around the inside rim of the drainage hole. Press a flat stone or cork into it firmly. Let it cure for 1 hour. This is what makes the pot hold water instead of immediately draining it downward. You are converting a standard pot into a sealed reservoir. Step 2. Dig your holes. Based on your drainage test results, dig straight-sided holes 8 inches deep for standard drainage soils, 6 inches deep for sandy fast-draining soils. The hole should be just wide enough to fit the pot snugly. You want soil contact on all sides. Air gaps reduce the capillary transfer. Space your holes every 18 to 24 inches along your planting rows. Step 3. Set the pot. Lower the pot into the hole. The rim should sit approximately 1 inch below the soil surface. Pack soil firmly around the sides by hand. No air pockets. Step 4. Fill and cap. Fill the pot completely with water. Place your flat stone or saucer over the top opening. This cap serves two purposes. It prevents evaporation from the open top, and it keeps debris and insects out. That cap is important. Don't skip it. Step 5. Surface mulch. Cover the entire bed surface with straw, hay, or dry leaves to a depth of 3 to 4 inches. Keep mulch pulled back 1 inch from plant stems to prevent rot. This layer does two things. It blocks surface evaporation, and it begins feeding soil biology as it slowly breaks down. Your total installation time for a 4-wax-8 bed, 35 to 40 minutes. What to expect within 24 hours. The soil within a 4 to 6 inch radius of each pot will be uniformly moist at root depth. The surface will look dry. That is correct. That is the system working. Moisture is where it belongs. Below, not above. Within 7 days, root tips will begin redirecting growth toward the moisture source. You will not see this, but it is happening. The plant is making a decision. Go down, not up. That decision will define its drought resilience for the rest of the season. Within 30 days, soil biology in the moist zone surrounding each pot will be measurably more active. Earthworm activity increases. Fungal threads, mycorrhizae, begin connecting root systems to the broader soil network. The plant gains access to nutrients it could not reach before. You will see it in the leaves first. Deeper green, thicker stems, less wilting between your refill cycles. Refill the pots every 2 to 3 days in hot, dry weather, every 4 to 5 days in mild conditions. Each pot holds approximately 1 liter. You are delivering water directly to the root zone with zero surface evaporation loss. Marcus Webb refilled his pots twice a week. That was his entire irrigation routine. 47 pounds of tomatoes. What Marcus built without knowing it had a name is a 3-tier system. Each tier does a different job. Each tier operates on a different timeline, and each tier amplifies the one beneath it. Remove any one tier, and the system still works. Keep all 3, and you have something closer to what Genesis 2 was describing. A self-regulating soil environment that does most of the work without you. Let's go through each one. Tier 1, Subsurface Water Mechanism. The mechanism, this is the buried clay pot, the ola, the foundation of everything. An unglazed terracotta wall has a porosity rate of approximately 8 to 12%. That means roughly 1/10 of the wall's volume is open pore space. Microscopic channels running through the fired clay from the inside surface to the outside surface. When the pot is filled with water and surrounded by dry soil, a pressure differential forms instantly. Inside the pot, positive hydrostatic pressure from the standing water column. Outside the pot, negative matrix potential from the dry soil pulling at moisture. Water moves from positive to negative, from inside to outside, through the clay wall, one molecule at a time. This is not a drip. It is not a spray. It is a continuous, silent, pressure-regulated seep. The drier the surrounding soil becomes, the stronger the pull. The wetter it becomes, the weaker the pull. The system self-regulates. It delivers more water when the plant needs more, and slows delivery when the soil is already saturated. No sensor, no timer, no algorithm. Dry soil does the sensing. The measurement. One standard 4-inch unglazed terracotta pot delivers water to a radius of approximately 5 to 7 inches in average garden loam. In sandy soil, that radius tightens to 4 to 5 inches. In heavier clay soil, it expands to 6 to 8 inches. Plant your seedlings within 6 inches of each pot. Their roots will find the moisture zone within the first week. Pot spacing, 1 pot per 4 to 5 square feet. Installation depth, 6 to 8 inches below surface. Water volume per fill, approximately 1 liter. Timeline, moisture equalization in surrounding soil begins within 2 to 4 hours of first fill. Root redirection toward moisture source begins within 5 to 7 days. Full root zone establishment at depth, meaning the plant has built its primary root architecture around the subsurface moisture source, occurs between 21 and 35 days after installation. The outcome? A plant whose root system is anchored at depth, 6, 8, sometimes 10 inches below the surface where soil temperature is stable, moisture is consistent, and the plant is effectively drought-proofed for short dry periods. This is the structural foundation of the entire system. Everything else builds on top of it. Tier 2, surface covering. The mechanism, straw, hay, dry leaves, wood chip, any organic material laid across the soil surface to a depth of 3 to 4 inches. This layer has one primary job and two secondary jobs. Primary job, stop evaporation. Bare soil in direct sunlight loses moisture from the top 4 inches at a rate that can exceed 1 inch of water equivalent per day in hot, arid conditions. That means on a 95-degree afternoon in July, your garden bed is losing the equivalent of 1 inch of rainfall every single day, just from surface exposure. A 3 to 4 inch straw mulch layer reduces that evaporation rate by 70 to 80%. The surface stays shaded. Soil temperature drops. Moisture stays in the ground instead of rising into the air. Secondary job 1, temperature regulation. Mulched soil runs 10 to 15 degrees Fahrenheit cooler at the surface than bare soil on the same hot day. Root zone stress drops significantly. Plants stop diverting energy toward heat management and redirect it toward growth and fruit production. Secondary job 2, biological feeding. Organic mulch is not inert. It is slowly decomposing. Every week that straw or hay sits on your soil surface, it is being broken down by fungi, bacteria, and soil invertebrates at the boundary layer between mulch and soil. The byproduct of that decomposition is humus, the most biologically active form of organic matter in any soil system. You are feeding your soil biology without doing anything. The mulch feeds itself downward. The measurement. Apply mulch at 3 to 4 inches depth across the entire bed surface. Pull back 1 inch from plant stems. Replenish when depth drops below 2 inches, typically every 4 to 6 weeks during the growing season. Cost. A standard straw bale covers approximately 100 square feet at 4-inch depth. Cost per bale, $6 to $10 depending on region. For a standard 408 raised bed, 32 square feet, 1/3 of a bale is sufficient. Cost per bed, under $4. Timeline. Evaporation reduction begins immediately upon application, within the first 24 hours. Soil temperature stabilization occurs within 48 hours. Measurable biological activity increase at the mulch soil boundary begins within 14 to 21 days. The outcome: a soil surface that holds moisture, stays cool, and begins a slow self-feeding cycle that improves soil structure every single season without any additional input from you. Year 1 soil is better than the soil you started with. Year 2 is better than year 1. The system builds on itself. Tier 3, soil biology activation. The mechanism. This is the tier most gardeners never think about, and it is the tier that explains why the biblical system doubles yield without adding fertilizer. Tiers 1 and 2 together create a specific set of conditions in your soil: consistent moisture at depth, stable temperature, organic material decomposing slowly at the surface. These 3 conditions, moisture, stability, food source, are precisely the conditions that soil microorganisms require to thrive. What happens next is not complicated, but it is extraordinary. Bacterial populations in the moist stable zone surrounding each buried pot begin multiplying within days. Fungal networks, primarily mycorrhizal fungi, extend thread-like hyphae outward from root surfaces into the surrounding soil. These hyphal threads are between 2 and 5 microns in diameter. They penetrate soil pore spaces that roots physically cannot reach. They are mining nutrients on the plant's behalf. Phosphorus locked in mineral compounds, nitrogen stored in decomposing organic matter, calcium, magnesium, trace minerals, all present in most garden soils, all largely inaccessible to plant roots without biological intermediaries. The fungi break the chemical bonds. They extract the minerals. They deliver them directly to the root surface in exchange for sugars the plant produces through photosynthesis. This is a trade, a biological market operating silently beneath your feet. When soil is dry, compacted, or repeatedly disrupted by tilling, this market collapses. The fungi die or go dormant. The bacteria populations crash. The plant is left alone, mining a depleted zone with no partners. That is when gardeners reach for the fertilizer bag. They are not solving the problem, they are bypassing the system that was always meant to solve it. The measurement, as referenced in the McGill University 2018 study, organic surface mulch combined with consistent subsurface moisture produces microbial biomass levels 280% higher than bare, surface-watered control plots after 21 days. A separate 2015 study from Wageningen University in the Netherlands measured mycorrhizal colonization rates in subsurface irrigated plots versus overhead irrigated plots. Subsurface irrigation plots showed 340% greater mycorrhizal root colonization after one growing season. 340%. That is not a marginal improvement. That is a different biological environment entirely. Timeline: bacterial population increase begins within 7 to 14 days of system installation. Mycorrhizal network establishment begins within 21 days. Full biological activation, meaning the plant is actively trading sugars for minerals through fungal networks, is measurable by day 30 to 45. This is why results accelerate through the season rather than plateauing. The system is not static, it is growing. The outcome: a plant with full access to the mineral wealth already present in your soil. No synthetic fertilizer required, no amendments purchased, no inputs beyond water and the occasional mulch replenishment. The nutrition was always there. Tier 3 is what unlocks it. The system working together. Here is what the 3 tiers look like operating simultaneously. The buried pot delivers consistent moisture to the root zone. The surface mulch holds that moisture in and begins feeding biology from above. The activated soil biology mines nutrients from mineral compounds and delivers them directly to the root surface. The plant receives water. The plant receives nutrition. The plant is not stressed by heat or drought. It is not fighting for survival. It is simply growing. That is the condition described in Genesis 2. Before irrigation systems, before fertilizer companies, before any of the complexity the modern gardening industry has built up around a process that has always been simple. Water below, cover above, life in between. 3 tiers, $3, 3,500 years old. There is one watering habit practiced by the majority of home gardeners in America today. It is damaging their plants. Quietly, consistently, season after season, and most of them will never connect the habit to the poor results they keep getting. The habit is this: frequent, shallow, overhead watering. A sprinkler running for 15 minutes every morning. A hose moved across the bed surface for 5 minutes every evening. An automatic timer set to run twice a day for short cycles. It feels responsible. It looks like attentive gardening. The soil surface is visibly wet. The plants look green. But underneath the surface, something is being systematically destroyed. What shallow watering does to root architecture. A plant root does not grow randomly. It grows toward resources: water, minerals, oxygen. The root system is a dynamic structure, constantly making directional decisions based on chemical and moisture signals in the surrounding soil. Scientists call this hydrotropism, the directed growth of roots toward moisture sources. When you water from above, shallowly and frequently, you are sending a very clear signal to every root in your garden bed. Stay near the surface. That is where the water is. The roots comply. Within 2 to 3 weeks of consistent shallow watering, the majority of a plant's active root mass concentrates in the top 2 to 4 inches of soil. This is called a shallow root mat. It is efficient for the plant under current conditions. It is catastrophic under any other conditions. Here is what happens next. You miss a watering cycle. You go away for a weekend. A heat dome settles over your region for 4 days, and temperatures hit 104 degrees Fahrenheit. The shallow root mat is now fully exposed to the most volatile zone in the entire soil profile. Surface soil temperature on a 104-degree day can reach 130 to 140 degrees Fahrenheit, 2 inches below the surface. Moisture at that depth evaporates within hours. The plant has no roots deeper than 4 inches. It has nowhere to go. Wilting begins within hours. Cell damage begins within 24 hours. A plant that looked healthy and productive 3 days ago is now in a survival crisis. Not because of drought exactly, but because of the root architecture that months of shallow watering produced. You trained it to be fragile. The research in 2009, researchers at UC Davis published findings from a multi-season study on irrigation depth and root development in vegetable crops. Plants irrigated at shallow depth, 2 inches or less, developed root systems with 43% less root mass below 6 inches compared to plants receiving deep or subsurface irrigation. 43% less. That missing root mass represents lost access to stable moisture, lost access to mineral-rich lower soil horizons, and lost drought resilience. The same study measured yield under induced drought stress, a simulated 4-day water cutoff during peak growing season. Shallow irrigated plants showed a 38% yield reduction during and after the stress period. Deep irrigated plants showed less than 9% yield reduction under identical conditions. Same seeds, same soil, same stress event. The difference was entirely in the root architecture built over the preceding weeks. One group of plants had been trained to go deep. One group had been trained to stay shallow. When the stress arrived, the training determined the outcome. Why modern irrigation systems make this worse standard? Residential drip tape, the kind sold in every hardware store and garden center, delivers water at the soil surface or just below it. 1/4 inch to 1/2 inch depth at most. It is more efficient than overhead sprinklers in terms of evaporation loss, but it still trains roots upward. The moisture source is at the surface. The roots follow. The shallow root mat still forms. The drought vulnerability still develops. The gardening industry sells this as a premium upgrade. It costs between $80 and $400 to install for a standard home garden setup. It requires UV-resistant tubing, emitters, pressure regulators, timers, and annual replacement of degraded components. And it still produces the same fundamental problem that a free garden hose produces, just more expensively. The scripture reinforcement turned to Jeremiah 17, verses 7 and 8. Blessed is the man who trusts in the Lord, whose trust is the Lord. He is like a tree planted by water that sends its roots out by the stream. Read the botanical detail in that verse. Not a tree sitting in water, not a tree with water poured on its leaves, a tree that sends its roots out toward the stream. The roots move toward a deep, stable, subsurface water source. The tree is not dependent on rain. It is not dependent on someone standing above it with a hose. It has built its root architecture around a permanent deep moisture source. And that architecture is what makes it unmovable in drought and heat. Jeremiah was not writing a poem about faith management. He was describing the observable difference between a tree with deep roots and a tree without them. The outcome for the deep-rooted tree: it does not fear when heat comes. Its leaves remain green. It is not anxious in the year of drought. It does not cease to bear fruit. Not anxious in the year of drought, does not cease to bear fruit. That is not a spiritual promise delivered to a specific tree. That is a description of what deep root architecture actually does under stress conditions. The instruction was always embedded in the observation. Plant your water source deep. Let the roots follow it down. Stop training your garden to be fragile. Let's talk about money. The average American home gardener spends $340 per season on soil amendments, fertilizer, irrigation equipment, and water costs. That number comes from a 2021 National Gardening Association survey. It does not include the cost of replacing failed plants or replanting after drought stress events. 347 every single season. Now let's look at what the biblical system actually costs. 6 unglazed terracotta pots for a standard 4-uriate bed, 12 and 1/3 of a straw bale for surface mulch, $3. A small tube of waterproof sealant, $2. Flat stones for pot caps, free, pulled from any yard or driveway edge. Total first-year investment, $17, not $347, $17. And here is where the numbers get more interesting. Those terracotta pots do not degrade. They do not crack from UV exposure. They do not develop emitter clogs. They do not require annual replacement. A properly installed unglazed clay pot buried in stable soil has a functional lifespan of 15 to 20 years minimum. Archaeologists have excavated intact ollas from sites that are over 2,000 years old. The clay was still structurally sound. The straw mulch breaks down into your soil over one growing season, feeding your biology as it disappears. Cost to replenish the following spring, $3. Your second year cost is $3. Your third year cost is $3. Now compare that to a standard residential drip irrigation system. Entry-level kit from a hardware store, $89. Mid-range system with timer and pressure regulator, $180 to $240. Premium system with Wi-Fi controller and soil moisture sensors, $350 to $500. Average replacement cycle for drip tape in outdoor conditions, 3 to 5 years due to UV degradation, emitter clogging, and rodent damage. Emitter replacement and tubing repairs add $20 to $60 per season in maintenance costs. Over a 10-year period, a mid-range drip system costs approximately $480 in initial setup plus $400 in maintenance and replacement. That is $880 across 10 seasons. The biblical system over the same 10-year period, $79 in year one, $3 per year for 9 subsequent years of mulch replenishment. Total 10-year cost, $44, $880 versus $44. The modern system costs 20 times more. It requires electricity or water pressure to operate. It requires seasonal installation and removal in cold climates. It requires troubleshooting when emitters fail or timers malfunction. The biblical system requires a shovel, an afternoon, and water poured by hand twice a week. Now add the fertilizer calculation. The average gardener spending $347 per season includes approximately $80 to $120 on soil amendments and synthetic fertilizers. Over 10 years, that is $800 to $200 spent feeding a soil biology that shallow overhead irrigation has already suppressed. The 3-tier biblical system, by activating existing soil biology through consistent subsurface moisture and organic surface mulch, eliminates the need for synthetic fertilizer inputs in established beds, not reduces, eliminates. You are not buying nutrition. You are unlocking nutrition that was already in your soil. Over 10 years, removing that fertilizer line item saves an additional $800 to $200. Add that to the irrigation savings. The total 10-year cost differential between a conventional modern garden setup and the biblical 3-tier system exceeds $2,600. For a 4 or 8 raised bed, 1 bed, 10 years, $2,600 difference. Marcus Webb figured this out in 2022. He didn't read a university study. He didn't attend a gardening conference. He found a reference to ancient clay pot irrigation in a biblical commentary, spent $3 at a dollar store, and ran his own test. 47 pounds of tomatoes, $3 invested. His neighbor spent $340 and harvested 22 pounds. The gap between those two outcomes is not luck. It is not soil quality. It is not seed genetics. It is the difference between a system designed around how soil and roots actually work and a system designed around products that need to be sold every season. One system gets better every year. The other one just gets more expensive. Ecclesiastes 1:19. There is nothing new under the sun. Solomon wrote that line approximately 3,000 years ago. He was not being cynical. He was being precise. He was observing something that every generation eventually rediscovers, that the fundamental principles governing the physical world do not change. Water moves from wet to dry. Roots follow moisture downward. Covered soil holds life. Bare soil loses it. These are not discoveries. They are constants. The modern gardening industry has built a $48 billion annual market around the idea that growing food is complicated, that it requires inputs, systems, sensors, amendments, and expertise delivered in a bag or a box or a subscription kit, that without their products, your soil is inadequate and your harvest will suffer. That idea is worth $48 billion to the people selling it. It costs you $300 a season to believe it. The farmers of the ancient Near East had none of those products. They had clay, straw, and an understanding of how water moves through soil. They farmed the Negev desert, 4 inches of rainfall per year, and produced grain crops consistently enough to sustain cities. They were not primitive. They were precise. What they built was not a workaround for the absence of modern technology. It was a complete system: subsurface moisture delivery, surface evaporation control, soil biology activation. that worked with the physical properties of soil rather than against them. We stopped using it not because something better came along. We stopped using it because something more profitable came along. There is a difference. The good news is the system never stopped working. The physics did not change. The soil biology did not change. The capillary properties of unglazed clay did not change. Everything that made this system produce harvests in 900 BC will produce harvests in your backyard this season. You do not need a degree in soil science. You do not need expensive equipment. You do not need to understand matrix potential or mycorrhizal colonization rates at a technical level. You need a $3 clay pot, a handful of straw, and one afternoon. The soil will do the rest. It has always known what to do. You are not teaching it anything new. You are simply stopping the habits that were interrupting it. That is the whole system. That is the whole lesson. Water below, cover above, life in between. If this video shifted something for you, if you looked at your garden differently for even 1 minute while watching it, share it with one person who is spending too much on a problem that was already solved 500 years ago. Drop your soil type in the comments: sand, clay, loam, or somewhere in between. I read everyone, and the next video in this series will be built around what you're actually working with. And if you haven't subscribed yet, this channel goes deeper than most are willing to go. Every video is built on the same foundation: scripture, physics, field evidence, in that order. No hype, no products, no shortcuts that aren't actually short, just the system that has always worked. See you in the next one.